here, let me give you an example from the current campaigns. So the one I'm most familiar with is, of course, Alison Hartson, the one I talk about the most, and that's, look, let's keep it real, it's the candidate I care most about, the one that I think would make the biggest difference. If you knocked out Feinstein, she is one of the grand poobahs of the establishment. She's one of the Brahmins. That's like knocking out their rook. That's gonna hurt. That's gonna leave a mark, okay? And the establishment will be in a rage. And then you've got our rook, right, inside their castle. I keep extending this analogy.
Sure, love
it. And so then you all of a sudden you have an Alison Hartson and a Bernie Sanders and a Elizabeth Warren, and Alison is fighting so aggressively, calling so many press conferences, breathing so much fire that Bernie seems like the centrist. Okay, so as opposed to Feinstein, who's just going to sit there like a lump on a log. War, yes. Violating your privacy, yes. Tax cuts, yes. Right. Oh, the difference is enormous. Okay, so anyway, I get passionate about that too. But for the purpose of this, what I wanted to explain is, they say, okay, Alison is not already a politician, so we are not going to include her in the polls. So some polls do include her, some polls don't. Now, if you ask any serious reporter and they look at this race, they would say that it's a 3-person race, Feinstein, Alison, and the third guy, whose name I don't like to mention. Okay, all right. So, and nonetheless, the people doing the polls, which cost in California about $30,000 to $40,000. Okay, so they're real numbers. Okay, so if you want to commission a poll, if you commission a poll, that doesn't mean you're going to get the results you want. You're just paying a polling agency to do a real poll on your behalf, not for you, but a real one. Otherwise, it's pointless. Then you threw the $30,000 in the garbage if you do a fake poll, right? But so it costs a lot of money. The guy who is, look, kidding aside, it's this guy Kevin DeLeon, okay? He's also running, he's a state senator, okay? And since he is a politician, oftentimes half the polls will be just him versus Feinstein. Well, you just gave him $40,000. In fact, you gave him more than that, because not only did you do a poll for him, but the poll frames it as a 2-person race.
Sure, that's what I thought you were going to say, which is that when you leave a name off the poll, it actually does an immense disservice to the name left off.
Immense, because nobody ever sees it. It's in all the papers. It's in the LA Times, the San Francisco Chronicle. It's
and
in
name recognition is so important, especially to a newer candidate.
That's right, and it makes it seem like he is a legitimate candidate, and that's a 2-person race. And so in that bias, which is monumental, that is so important, that bias hurts non-politicians, non-establishment figures in a way that is hard to quantify, but it is a massive establishment bias. And then every paper in California runs the results of those polls. KDL would have run that poll anyway. You saved him $40,000, but like we just talked about, that's the least of it. That's handing him hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is free because he's part of the establishment. Now, Alison has run a national organization with over 30,000 volunteers. She's gotten what other people said were impossible legislation passed in 5 states, including California. It is on the #1 issue that California voters say they care about, which is money in politics. That poll was done. #1 issue, money in politics. She's a teacher who served her community and then went on to work on this political organization, but one that is anti-establishment, to get money out of politics, and had tremendous results. If that is not a legitimate candidate, and she has 1,500 volunteers, Feinstein has 0 volunteers.
Sure.
Isn't that amazing? She outraised Feinstein and KDL, Alison did in the last quarter, with small donors, both of them combined, okay? That's amazing. And they're like, no, we're not gonna put her in a poll. That's establishment bias. And then when the establishment media has the temerity to turn around and tell us we're biased.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, that's an implicit bias. That's the most dangerous kind of bias. I mean, we say we're progressive here at TYT.
That's right.
And we talk about, we try to speak as objectively as we can, but we explain, hey, we're looking at these things objectively. We have a progressive bias, but even if you look at it objectively, we come to these conclusions. But the implicit bias, the one that we're talking about, where you're left off a poll, where you're left out of a debate, where certain things that help build name recognition are built into the system. Those are some of the most damaging.
And so one last thing about that. Now, that's just one example, but there are many, many others. So the media, so there's the polling. Then there's all the other media articles, right? So do they cover Alison or don't they cover Alison? And that's also tons and tons of free media in a race where the money is so important. But maybe the most important of all those examples is they view how much money you have as a proxy, and almost not only one of the metrics, not only the most important metric, but almost the only metric as to whether you are legitimate and credible or not. So what does that do? That by definition favors the corrupt, because they can go and take super PAC money, corporate PAC money, and they can raise more money. Feinstein gave her own campaign $5 million. Why? She has 80 million, she's 84 years old, she's not gonna miss it. Her husband's a billionaire, 5 million is nothing to them. So then the press goes, look at Dianne Feinstein, she has $5 million. So she is legitimate and wonderful and terrific, etc. And you, well, you don't have $5 million to give yourself, so you are illegitimate. So the only thing that can make you legitimate is money. And then they wonder how the system got so corrupt.